My name is Bertha, and I'm 67 years old. 5 years ago, my husband Patrick passed away unexpectedly, leaving me with a staggering $52 million inheritance that I've kept quiet about. My son William has always been the light of my life, so when he announced his engagement to Amanda, I was cautiously happy for him. Something about her made me uneasy, but I wanted to support my son's choice. I decided to stay silent about our family fortune during their wedding festivities. Now, looking back, that decision may have been the wisest one I've ever made. Before I share my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoy real stories about family, money, and the surprising truths we learn about people. I grew up in a modest neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. My father worked as a high school math teacher, and my mother was a part-time librarian. We never had much, but they taught me the value of education, hard work, and integrity. These values shaped who I became and how I viewed the world. I met Patrick during my sophomore year at Northwestern University. I was studying English literature while working part-time at a local bookstore to help with expenses. Patrick was a business major with big dreams and an infectious enthusiasm that drew me to him immediately. He wasn't conventionally handsome, but his intelligence and determination made him irresistible to me. Our romance blossomed quickly, and we married a year after graduation. Those early years were financially challenging. We lived in a tiny apartment in Chicago, carefully budgeting every dollar. Patrick had turned down lucrative job offers because he was determined to start his own business. I supported us by teaching at a local community college, while Patrick worked day and night developing software for inventory management systems. In 1983, Patrick's persistence paid off when he secured his first major client, a regional retail chain. That was the beginning of Tech Solutions, his company that would eventually revolutionize retail inventory systems nationwide. As the business grew, so did our lifestyle. Though Patrick was always more conservative with spending than one might expect from a successful entrepreneur. He drove the same car for 15 years and insisted we live well below our means. William came along in 1985, our only child. We had tried for more children, but complications from William's birth made that impossible. Perhaps that's why both Patrick and I doted on him so much. Even as the business demanded more of Patrick's time, he made sure to be present for William's milestones and important moments. Our family bond was strong, though not without challenges. Patrick's workaholic tendencies sometimes created tension. There were missed dinners, postponed vacations, and the occasional argument about priorities. I understood his drive, but worried about the toll it was taking on his health. I tried to create balance in our family life, making our home a sanctuary where both Patrick and William could recharge and reconnect. The irony of life is that despite all my concerns, nothing prepared us for what happened. Patrick was only 65 when he collapsed during his morning run. A massive heart attack took him instantly, the doctor said. There was no warning, no chance to say goodbye. One day, he was discussing expansion plans over breakfast, and the next, I was planning his funeral. The shock of his death was compounded by the revelation of our true financial situation. I knew we were comfortable, but I had no idea of the empire Patrick had built. The company had grown exponentially over the decades, and Patrick had made several shrewd investments that multiplied our wealth. When all was tallied, I inherited $52 million plus majority ownership in a company worth nearly twice that. I was overwhelmed. Patrick had always handled our finances consulting me on major decisions, but managing the details himself. Suddenly, I had wealth managers, attorneys, and business executives looking to me for direction. It felt like wearing someone else's shoes, expensive ones that didn't quite fit. I decided to keep our wealth low-key for several reasons. First, I wasn't comfortable with the attention it might bring. Second, and more importantly, I wanted to protect William. He was 34 at the time of his father's death, established in his own career in finance. Patrick and I had always agreed that while we would provide William with advantages like excellent education, we wouldn't spoil him or rob him of the satisfaction that comes from building his own life. William knew we were well off. He grew up in a nice home, in a good neighborhood, attended private schools, and graduated from Yale debt-free. But he had no idea of the true extent of his father's success. Patrick had wanted William to develop his own work ethic and sense of purpose, not just wait for an inheritance. I decided to honor that wish, at least until I felt William was ready for the responsibility that came with such wealth. In the years following Patrick's death, I downsized to a comfortable but not ostentatious home in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood, donated generously to causes Patrick and I had supported, and learned to manage our wealth responsibly. I lived well, but modestly, by the standards of the truly rich. And I watched with pride as William built his own successful career, never suspecting he was actually the heir to a fortune that would change his life. William was always an easy child to love, thoughtful, kind, and blessed with his father's intelligence and my empathy. From an early age, he showed a natural curiosity and determination that made teaching him a joy. I remember when he was just 7, he started a neighborhood lemonade stand. Instead of spending his earnings on toys, like other children might, he reinvested in better ingredients and marketing, creating hand-drawn flyers that he distributed door to door. Patrick was so proud seeing his own entrepreneurial spirit reflected in our son. Throughout his school years, William maintained excellent grades while participating in debate club and volunteer work. He wasn't perfect. There were the usual teenage rebellions and missteps, but his core character remained strong. We paid for his education at Yale, for his undergraduate degree, and then Harvard Business School, but he worked summer internships and took his studies seriously. He wasn't one of those wealthy kids coasting through college on their parents' dime. After completing his MBA, William took a position at a prestigious financial firm in Boston. He could have asked Patrick for connections or help, but he wanted to forge his own path. Over the next decade, he climbed the ranks through hard work and talent, eventually becoming a senior investment manager with his own impressive portfolio of clients. He bought his own condo in Beacon Hill, drove a nice but not flashy car, and built a respectable nest egg through smart investing. I was immensely proud of the man he had become. Then, Amanda entered the picture. They met at a charity fundraiser for the Boston Symphony Orchestra. William was there representing his firm, which was a sponsor of the event. Amanda was working for the event planning company. According to William, it was love at first sight. He was captivated by her confidence, beauty, and charm. Amanda was undeniably attractive. Tall, poised with perfectly styled blonde hair and a dazzling smile. She had graduated from Boston University with a degree in communications and worked in event planning for luxury brands and high-end charities. She came from what she described as an upper-middle-class family from Connecticut, though I later discovered their financial situation was more precarious than she let on. Their romance progressed at whirlwind speed. Within 2 months, William was bringing Amanda to family dinners at my home. I tried to be warm and welcoming, but something about Amanda triggered my maternal instincts in a way I couldn't quite articulate. She was unfailingly polite and charming in William's presence, but I noticed subtle changes in her demeanor when he left the room. A slight cooling in her tone, a sharpness in her questions about our family background. There were small incidents that raised red flags. Once, when William excused himself to take a work call, Amanda commented on my modest watch, saying, "I would have expected Patrick's widow to wear something more substantial." Another time, she questioned why I lived in such a small place when tech solutions had been so successful. These comments were always delivered with a smile, but they left me uneasy. I also noticed how her eyes lingered on the few valuable items in my home. Patrick's collection of rare first edition books, an original painting by a well-known Boston artist, the antique desk that had belonged to Patrick's grandfather. She seemed to be mentally cataloging everything of value. But William was blind to these warning signs. He saw only the charming, supportive woman who laughed at his jokes and showed interest in his work. When he talked about Amanda, his face lit up in a way that reminded me of Patrick, and despite my reservations, I couldn't bear to dampen his happiness. Just 6 months after they met, William brought Amanda to Sunday dinner at my house and announced their engagement. He had proposed with a ring that I knew must have cost him nearly 2 months' salary. Amanda beamed as she extended her hand to show me the substantial diamond. "Isn't it perfect, Bertha?" Though I told William he shouldn't have spent so much when we're saving for our future. The comment seemed designed to highlight both her apparent frugality and subtly press for information about their future financial prospects. I plastered on a smile and offered my congratulations, but my heart was heavy with concern. That night, after they left, I sat in Patrick's old study and imagined what advice he would give me. Should I voice my concerns to William? Should I tell him about his inheritance now so he could protect it with a prenuptial agreement? Or would that information change him, change his relationship with Amanda, before I could be certain of her character? After much reflection, I decided to keep my concerns and the information about the inheritance to myself, at least for the time being. I wanted to give Amanda the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps my suspicions were just the overprotective worries of a mother who didn't think anyone was good enough for her son. I would watch and wait, hoping my instincts were wrong. The next 6 months were consumed by wedding preparations. Amanda quickly took control, creating elaborate Pinterest boards and spreadsheets detailing every aspect of what was clearly going to be an extremely and lavish affair. What had initially been discussed as an intimate gathering for 100 guests ballooned into a 3-day event for 250 people at an exclusive coastal resort in Maine. I watched with growing concern as William's financial strain became evident. Though he earned a good salary, the expenses were mounting rapidly. The 5-figure deposit for the venue, Amanda's designer gown, the premium open bar package, the renowned string quartet, the celebrity photographer. When I gently suggested scaling back, Amanda would counter with, "But this is our only wedding, Bertha. Don't you want it to be special?" The implication being that if I objected, I didn't want my son to be happy. William started working longer hours, and I noticed him checking his investment accounts more frequently on his phone. Once, I overheard him on a call with his credit card company, requesting a limit increase. My heart ached seeing him stretch himself thin to meet Amanda's expectations. The dynamic grew more complicated when I met Amanda's parents, Robert and Diana Lewis, at the engagement party. They were pleasant enough on the surface. Robert worked in real estate development, and Diana was a former elementary school teacher who now volunteered at their country club. But throughout the evening, I caught glimpses of tension. Diana drank too much champagne and made several references to finally having something to celebrate after Robert's little setback. Later, William explained that Robert's real estate company had suffered significant losses during the last economic downturn, and they had been forced to downsize considerably. They maintained appearances in their social circle, but they were actually struggling financially. This explained Amanda's fixation on wealth and status. She had grown up in prosperity only to see it diminish in her young adulthood. At the engagement party, I accidentally overheard a conversation between Amanda and her mother in the powder room. I had entered the adjoining stall without them noticing my presence. "Has William mentioned anything about his inheritance?" Diana asked in a hushed tone. "Not yet, Mom," Amanda replied, annoyance evident in her voice. "I've dropped hints, but he seems clueless. He says Bertha never discussed money matters with him." "Well, that company must have been worth millions," Diana insisted. "And they only had the one child. You need to find out before the wedding, Amanda. The prenup would be much more favorable if you know what you're dealing with." "I'm working on it," Amanda said sharply. "But I have to be careful. William is so sensitive about his father, and Bertha watches me like a hawk." I sat frozen, my suspicions confirmed, in the most painful way. I managed to leave without them noticing me, but the conversation played on repeat in my mind for days afterward. As the wedding date approached, Amanda's demands and expectations grew along with her impatience with William's apparent financial limitations. When they were together in public or around me, she maintained the facade of the loving, supportive fiancé. But I began to notice William's subtle changes. A new tension around his mouth, a hesitancy before agreeing to Amanda's latest request, a weariness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. The situation came to a head 3 months before the wedding, when William came to see me alone. We sat in my small garden, the spring flowers just beginning to bloom. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. "Mom," he began hesitantly, "I know this might be a difficult conversation, but I need to ask about Dad's estate." My heart sank, but I kept my expression neutral. "What about it, William?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father's that it made my chest ache. "The wedding expenses are more than I anticipated, and Amanda has her heart set on a honeymoon in the Maldives. I've tapped into my savings, but I'm wondering if there might be, I know Dad left you provided for, and I've never wanted to ask, but you're wondering if there's an inheritance coming to you?" I finished for him. He nodded, looking ashamed. "I wouldn't ask, but things are tight right now." And Amanda mentioned that most families discuss these matters before marriages. I took a deep breath. This was the moment of decision. I could tell him everything about the $52 million, about the company shares, worth even more, about how it would all be his eventually. But something held me back. Maybe it was the memory of that conversation in the powder room, or maybe it was the uncharacteristic anxiety I saw in my confident, self-sufficient son as he asked for money for the first time in his adult life. "Your father left everything to me, William," I said carefully. "He believed, as I do, that you should build your own success. But I can help with some of the wedding expenses if you're struggling." I offered him $20,000, a generous gift from a comfortably off mother, but nowhere near what I could have given, and certainly nothing that would hint at the fortune I was safeguarding. William looked simultaneously relieved and disappointed. "Thanks, Mom. That will help a lot." When Amanda learned of my contribution, she couldn't hide her disappointment. "Only 20,000, she said when William told her, not realizing I could hear from the kitchen. "I thought your father's company was successful. What happened to all that money? Mom has her retirement to think about." William defended me, and Dad always believed in financial independence. Amanda's laugh had a bitter edge. "Well, that's convenient. Meanwhile, my parents are taking out a second mortgage to help with the honeymoon." I pretended not to have heard when I returned to the living room, but the resentment in Amanda's eyes told me she knew I had been listening and didn't care. From that day forward, her pretense of warmth toward me dropped several degrees, and her comments about money became more frequent and pointed. The wedding day arrived in June, with picture-perfect weather at the coastal resort. Despite my reservations about Amanda and the strain the extravagant event had placed on William, I couldn't help feeling emotional. Seeing my son in his tuxedo, looking so much like Patrick on our own wedding day decades ago. The ceremony and reception were undeniably beautiful, if ostentatious by my standards. Crystal chandeliers hung from the tent ceiling, rare orchids adorned every table, and a 10-piece band played as champagne flowed freely. I estimated the final cost at well over $150,000, a sum that made me wince, knowing how it had stretched William's finances and indebted Amanda's parents. The tension between myself and Amanda's family was palpable throughout the day. Diana Lewis, overdressed in a beaded gown that must have cost thousands, made several passive-aggressive comments about my simple blue silk dress and minimal jewelry. "So refreshing to see someone embrace understatement," she said with a tight smile, champagne glass clutched in her bejeweled hand. Robert Lewis seemed perpetually anxious, his eyes darting to the open bar where he made frequent visits. Amanda was the perfect bride in public, graciously greeting guests, dancing with William's elderly great-uncle, posing patiently for countless photographs. But I caught glimpses of her true nature in unguarded moments, snapping at a server who spilled water, rolling her eyes, when my brother gave a heartfelt but rambling toast, and most tellingly, the calculated way she navigated the room, spending the most time with the wealthiest and most influential guests. Still, seeing William's happiness made me doubt my concerns. He beamed with pride as he introduced Amanda as his wife, his eyes shining with love when he looked at her. During their first dance, the tenderness between them seemed genuine, and I wondered if perhaps I had misjudged her. Maybe her focus on money and status was just insecurity from her family's financial troubles, not a fundamental character flaw. For William's sake, I hoped I was wrong about her. The wedding toasts revealed much about the different values between our families. Amanda's father gave the speech focused almost entirely on the couple's bright future prospects and the merger of two great families, as if it were a business acquisition rather than a marriage. William's best friend since college spoke about William's integrity, kindness, and the deep love he obviously felt for Amanda. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple and heartfelt. I welcomed Amanda to our family, shared brief anecdotes about William's compassionate nature since childhood, and ended by saying that Patrick would have been so proud of the man his son had become. I noticed Amanda shift uncomfortably at the mention of Patrick, perhaps reminded of the inheritance she believed she was missing out on. For my gift to William, I had chosen something priceless rather than expensive. Patrick's vintage Omega watch the one he had worn every day of their married life, accompanied by a heartfelt letter sharing memories and wisdom Patrick had wanted to pass down. When William opened it, tears filled his eyes, and he embraced me tightly. "This means more than anything, Mom," he whispered. Amanda, standing beside him, couldn't quite hide her disappointment at the sentimental rather than valuable nature of the gift. After the reception ended in the early hours of the morning, William and Amanda departed for their 3-week honeymoon in the Maldives, staying in an exclusive overwater bungalow that I knew cost over $2,000 per night. As the guests waved them off, Diana Lewis sidled up to me, slightly unsteady from champagne. "Such a beautiful beginning," she said, watching the decorated car disappear down the driveway. "They make such a handsome couple. Amanda has always deserved the very best." She turned to me with an intensity that belied her inebriated state. "William is lucky to have her, you know. She had many suitors, some from very established families. William is a wonderful man in his own right," I replied evenly. "He has built a successful career through his own talents and hard work." "Oh, yes, of course," Diana said dismissively. "But now they can really start building their future. I assume they'll be looking for a house in Beacon Hill or perhaps Brookline after the honeymoon, something befitting William's position as Patrick's son." The emphasis she placed on Patrick's son, rather than William's own accomplishments, told me everything about her expectations. I made a non-committal response and excused myself, exhausted by the day's emotions and the effort of maintaining a polite facade. Back in my quiet home the next day, I reflected on whether I had made the right choice in keeping the inheritance secret. The wedding had cost William his savings and probably put him in debt. Would it have been kinder to have told him the truth before the wedding? Or would that knowledge have changed him, changed the relationship in ways that might not have been for the better? My contemplation was interrupted by a surprise visit from Diana Lewis, who appeared at my door looking far less glamorous than she had at the wedding, the strain of the weekend evident on her face. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion, Bertha," she said, declining my offer of tea and getting straight to the point. "Robert and I are facing some financial challenges after contributing to the wedding, and we were hoping to get some clarity about Patrick's estate and what that might mean for the kids' future." The directness of the approach shocked me, though perhaps it shouldn't have after what I'd overheard in the powder room. "I'm not sure I understand what you're asking, Diana," I said carefully. "Well," she continued undeterred, "we know Tech Solutions was quite successful. Robert did some research. The company was valued at over $70 million when it was acquired, and as Patrick's only heir, besides yourself, William must have a substantial inheritance coming. We just want to understand the timeline for planning purposes." The calculation in her eyes made my decision crystal clear. "Patrick believed strongly in financial independence," I said firmly. "He left provisions for my comfort, but his estate was significantly reduced by market downturns and healthcare costs in his final years. William understands and respects that there isn't a substantial inheritance waiting for him." The disappointment and disbelief that flashed across Diana's face confirmed my worst suspicions about her family's interest in my son. After she left, I received a call from William, checking in from the honeymoon. Though he tried to sound carefree, I detected an unfamiliar tension in his voice. When I asked if everything was all right, he hesitated before assuring me they were having a wonderful time. That hesitation spoke volumes. 3 weeks later, William and Amanda returned from their honeymoon, tanned and outwardly happy, though I noticed a certain guardedness in my son that hadn't been there before. They came to dinner at my home, their first weekend back. Amanda wore new jewelry that I hadn't seen before, expensive pieces that seemed at odds with their supposed budget constraints. The conversation flowed pleasantly enough through the appetizer course as they shared edited highlights from their trip: snorkeling adventures, luxurious spa treatments, romantic dinners on the beach. But as the evening progressed, I began to notice subtle undercurrents of tension. Amanda frequently checked her phone, sighing dramatically at messages. William seemed hyper-aware of her moods, adjusting his comments and behavior in response to her nonverbal cues, in a way that reminded me of someone walking on eggshells. When Amanda excused herself to take a call after dinner, claiming it was work emergency, despite it being Saturday evening, William visibly relaxed. In that brief window of privacy, I took the opportunity to check in with him more honestly. "How are you really doing, sweetheart?" I asked, reaching across the table to cover his hand with mine. William hesitated, glancing toward the hallway, where Amanda had disappeared. "It's been an adjustment," he admitted. "The honeymoon was amazing, but there were some tense moments." "That's normal," I offered, though the worry in his eyes suggested something beyond typical newlywed friction. "Amanda found some financial documents in my home office while packing for the honeymoon," he said quietly. "Statements from Dad's estate planning that mentioned Tech Solutions' valuation years ago. She's convinced there must be a significant inheritance that I'm not telling her about." He ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture of stress. "I tried to explain that whatever Dad had must have gone to you for your security, but she doesn't believe that the company could have been worth so much and left us with nothing, as she puts it." My heart sank. "William, your financial situation is hardly nothing. You have a wonderful career that you've built yourself. Your father would have been so proud of that." "I know, Mom, and I've always been grateful for the education you and Dad provided and the values you taught me. I never expected an inheritance." "But Amanda," he trailed off as we heard her heels clicking back down the hallway. Amanda returned with a brittle smile, her earlier warmth noticeably diminished. Throughout dessert, she made several pointed comments about friends who had received generous parental support to buy homes in exclusive neighborhoods or start businesses. William grew increasingly uncomfortable, while I maintained a neutral expression, redirecting the conversation whenever possible. As the weeks passed, I saw William less frequently, but when I did, the changes in him were concerning. His natural confidence seemed diminished, his usual enthusiastic stories about work projects replaced with brief, generic updates. When I asked about their plans to look for a home together, he mentioned that Amanda was frustrated with what they could afford in their target neighborhoods. Then came the Saturday morning when William showed up unannounced at my door, looking as though he hadn't slept. Over coffee, he confided that the arguments about money had escalated. Amanda had discovered his student loan statements, modest by most standards, but still substantial, and had been deeply disappointed that he wasn't as financially secure as she had assumed. She said she thought, as Patrick Thompson's son, I would have more to offer. William said, the hurt evident in his voice, as if my own work means nothing. "Oh, William," I said, my heart breaking for him. "It's not just that Mom. She's become obsessed with finding out about Dad's estate. She's convinced you're hiding something from us. Last night, she suggested I consult a lawyer about potential inheritance rights." He looked up at me, his expression pained. "I would never do that. I just want her to love me for who I am, not what she thinks I should have inherited. Meanwhile, Amanda launched what I could only describe as a charm offensive toward me. She began calling regularly, suggesting lunch dates and shopping trips. Her manner was warm but calculating. During these outings, she would casually steer conversations toward Patrick, asking seemingly innocent questions about his business decisions, whether he had collected art or investments, and if he had been traditional about passing wealth to the next generation. I answered vaguely, increasingly, certain that my decision to withhold information about the inheritance had been the right one. My suspicions were confirmed when I returned home early from a community board meeting one afternoon to find Amanda in my study, hastily closing my computer. She claimed she had been looking for family photos to surprise William with, but the browser history revealed searches for tech solutions, acquisition value, and Massachusetts inheritance laws. Rather than confronting her, I simply increased my vigilance and secured my financial documents more carefully. I began to document these concerning behaviors, unsure if or when I might need to share them with William, who was still trying desperately to make his marriage work, despite the growing evidence of Amanda's true priorities. 6 weeks after their return from the honeymoon, I invited William and Amanda for dinner to celebrate my birthday. I had kept it intentionally small, just the three of us, hoping that a low-pressure evening might ease some of the obvious tension that had been building. I prepared Patrick's famous lasagna recipe and splurged on a good bottle of wine, wanting to create a warm family atmosphere. The evening started pleasantly enough, with Amanda presenting me with an expensive-looking scarf that I suspected William had paid for. We made casual conversation through the appetizer course, mostly about neutral topics, like an upcoming exhibit at the Museum of Fine Arts and a new restaurant that had opened downtown. The shift happened during the main course, after Amanda had consumed most of a bottle of wine herself. William was telling me about a challenging project at work when Amanda interrupted him. "Speaking of challenges," she said, swirling her wine glass, "I've been meaning to ask you something directly, Bertha." The slight slur in her words and the glint in her eye put me immediately on guard. "Why exactly have you been so secretive about Patrick's estate?" William set down his fork with a clatter. "Amanda, we agreed not to discuss this tonight." "No, you said not to discuss it," Amanda countered, her polite veneer cracking. "But I think it's a perfectly reasonable question. Families shouldn't keep secrets, especially financial ones." I took a measured sip of water, buying time to frame my response carefully. "I'm not sure what you're suggesting, Amanda. Patrick's estate was settled years ago, and as I've told William, he provided for my retirement. There's no great mystery." Amanda laughed, a sharp, unpleasant sound. "That's impossible. Tech Solutions was acquired for over $70 million. Where did all that money go? It certainly isn't reflected in your lifestyle." She gestured dismissively around my comfortable but modest dining room. William's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "That's enough, Amanda. You're being disrespectful." "I'm being practical," she snapped back. "When we got engaged, I thought I was marrying the son of a successful businessman, someone who would have the resources to give us the life we deserve. Instead, I find out he's drowning in student loan debt and can barely afford the mortgage on a decent home in a good neighborhood." The naked materialism in her statement hung in the air like a noxious gas. William stared at his wife, as if seeing her clearly for the first time, the pain of betrayal etched across his features. "Is that why you married me?" he asked quietly. "For what you thought I would inherit." Amanda realized her mistake too late. She reached for his hand, but he pulled away. Of course not, honey. I love you. I'm just frustrated because I feel like there's this big secret being kept from us from you. You deserve to know the truth about your father's legacy. My father's legacy is right here, William said firmly, pointing to his heart. His values, his example, his love, that's what matters to me. Oh, please, Amanda scoffed, the alcohol loosening her tongue further. Don't be naive, William. Money is what matters in the real world. Love doesn't pay for vacations in Aspen or summer homes on the vineyard. It doesn't get your kids into the right schools or secure your future. Is that all you care about? William asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Don't act so shocked, Amanda said, her tone turning cruel. Did you really think someone like me would be satisfied with your mediocre salary and your modest ambitions? I thought there was more to the story, the hidden family fortune, the trust fund that would eventually come. My mother did her research on the Thompson family. The numbers don't add up. She turned her gaze to me, accusatory. She's hiding something from you, and you're too much of a mama's boy to demand answers. William stood up so abruptly, his chair nearly toppled backward. I think you should leave. Amanda stared at him in disbelief. Excuse me. Get a taxi, go to a hotel, go to your parents. I don't care, but I can't look at you right now. His voice was shaking with a combination of rage and grief. You're choosing her over me, your wife, Amanda demanded, gesturing at me. This isn't about choosing sides, William said, his composure returning slightly. This is about respect and values and what marriage means to me. It's clearly not what it means to you. Amanda grabbed her purse and stood swaying slightly from the wine. Fine, but this conversation isn't over. There's something fishy about your father's money, and I intend to find out what it is. She stormed out the front door, slamming behind her hard enough to rattle the windows. In the silence that followed, I watched my son crumple into his chair, his head in his hands. I moved to sit beside him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders, the way I used to when he was a little boy, with a scraped knee or a disappointing baseball game. I'm so sorry, William, I said softly. I never wanted you to be hurt like this. You saw it from the beginning, didn't you? He asked, looking up at me with reddened eyes. You knew what she was really after. I nodded reluctantly. I had concerns, but I wanted to be wrong for your sake. I wanted to believe she loved you for who you are, not what she thought you might have. I've been such a fool, he said bitterly. All those arguments about money, her constant pressure to ask you about Dad's estate. I should have seen the signs. Love blinds us sometimes, I said gently. There's no shame in wanting to see the best in someone you care for. William was quiet for a long moment, processing the painful revelations of the evening. Maybe Dad was right to keep me in the dark about the family finances, he finally said. If I'd known about any inheritance, I might never have seen Amanda's true colors. I squeezed his shoulder, thinking how much like his father he was in his wisdom, even in this moment of pain. Your happiness has always been what matters most to me, William. Whatever happens next, I'm here for you. He nodded, straightening his shoulders slightly, in a gesture of resilience I recognized from both his childhood determination and his father's steadfastness in the face of business challenges. I know, Mom. I've always known that. The week that followed was one of the most difficult of William's life, and by extension, mine as well. He moved temporarily into my guest house, needing space to process the implosion of his marriage, but not wanting to be completely alone. Amanda alternated between angry texts demanding financial transparency and tearful phone calls pleading for reconciliation. I gave William his space, but made sure healthy meals appeared at regular intervals and that he knew I was available whenever he wanted to talk. I watched him move through the initial stages of grief, the shock and denial, giving way to anger, then to a profound sadness that manifested in long walks alone along the Charles River and sleepless nights I could track by the light under his door. On the fifth day, as we shared a quiet breakfast on the patio, William looked up from his coffee with newfound clarity in his eyes. "I need to know the truth, Mom, about Dad's estate, about what Amanda was so convinced existed. Not because it matters to my decision about the marriage, but because I need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with." I had been preparing for this moment, knowing it would eventually come. I nodded, went into my study, and returned with a leather portfolio containing the key documents that outlined the full extent of Patrick's legacy. I placed it on the table between us. "Your father left $52 million in liquid assets," I said simply, "plus controlling interest in tech solutions worth approximately twice that amount at the time of his death. It's all grown significantly in the 5 years since." William's jaw literally dropped. He stared at me in disbelief. $52 million, and you've been living in a 3-bedroom condo and driving a 4-year-old Volvo. I smiled slightly. "The money never mattered much to me, William, or to your father. We agreed long ago that we wanted to raise you with values, not with wealth. Patrick was adamant that you should make your own way in the world, at least until you had proven to yourself what you were capable of. He was so proud of what you accomplished on your own merit." "But why keep it secret after he died?" William asked, still processing the magnitude of the revelation. "Initially, because I was respecting his wishes. Then, because I needed time to learn how to manage such wealth responsibly. And finally," I hesitated, "because of Amanda." William finished for me, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You were protecting me." I nodded. "I had concerns about her motivations from early on. I wanted to be wrong, William. I truly did. But I couldn't bear the thought of you being loved for your inheritance, rather than for yourself." William sat back, running both hands through his hair. "If she had known about this money before the wedding, the prenuptial agreement would have been very different," I acknowledged. "Or perhaps there wouldn't have been one at all. She might have found ways to access the funds directly. She would have hidden her true nature even more skillfully," William said quietly. "I might have been trapped in a loveless marriage for years before discovering the truth." We sat in silence for several minutes as William absorbed the implications. Finally, he straightened a new resolve, evident in his posture. "I need to try one more thing before I make any final decisions. I want to suggest marriage counseling, not because I think it will work, but because I need to know I gave this every possible chance." I respected his commitment to his vows, even in the face of such betrayal. Amanda initially agreed to counseling, appearing at the first session with tearful apologies and promises to work on her issues around financial security. But when the counselor gently suggested exploring prenuptial modifications, and William mentioned there was indeed a family inheritance, but that it came with firm legal protections, Amanda's facade cracked. "What protections?" she demanded, all pretense of contrition vanishing. "How much are we talking about, and when do we get access?" The counselor looked startled at the sudden shift, but William remained calm. "That reaction tells me everything I need to know," he said sadly. The next day, Amanda arrived at my home unannounced, catching me gardening in the backyard. Her designer outfit and perfect makeup contrasted sharply with my dirt-smudged jeans and gardening gloves. "I want to propose a settlement," she announced without preamble. "I know there's significant family money. William finally admitted it yesterday. I'm willing to sign an agreement not to contest the prenup in exchange for a lump sum payment. $2 million seems fair, considering the emotional distress and damage to my reputation." I stood up slowly, brushing soil from my hands. "Amanda, I think you should discuss this with William and his attorney." "Don't play innocent with me, Bertha," she snapped. "We both know you're the one controlling the purse strings. You've been pulling them since day one, keeping William dependent on you, turning him against me." "William is a grown man who makes his own decisions," I replied evenly. "And he's seen your true priorities quite clearly now." Her composure slipped completely, then revealing the calculating woman beneath the polished exterior. "Do you have any idea who I could have married instead of your son, Bradley Phillips, from the Boston Phillips family, pursued me for months. His family has generational wealth, not nouveau riche tech money. I chose William because he was kind, and I thought his inheritance would come without the family politics. What a miscalculation." I felt a strange sense of calm, knowing that every word she spoke was confirming the wisdom of my earlier caution. "I'm sorry you feel you made a poor business decision, Amanda. But marriage isn't a merger or acquisition. It's a partnership built on love and shared values." She laughed bitterly. "Save the hallmark sentiment. We both know money is what matters in the end. So what's it going to be? $2 million to walk away quietly? Or should I start telling people about how the grieving widow has been hoarding her son's inheritance?" "I think you should leave now," I said firmly. "Any further communication should go through our respective attorneys." William filed for divorce the following day. The process was mercifully quick, facilitated by the solid prenuptial agreement and the fact that they had no children and few joint assets. Amanda made a few attempts to challenge the prenup, claiming she had signed under false pretenses. But her case collapsed when her own text messages to friends were submitted as evidence revealing her explicit interest in William's potential inheritance from the beginning of their relationship. 6 months after the ill-fated wedding dinner that exposed Amanda's true nature, William and I sat on the deck of his new waterfront home south of Boston. It was a modest property by wealthy standards, a comfortable 4-bedroom house with a small dock where he kept a sailboat, his one significant indulgence after learning of his inheritance. The autumn sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks as we sipped hot apple cider. "I've been thinking a lot about Dad lately," William said, watching a pair of ducks paddle across the cove. "About the choices he made regarding the family money and why he was so determined for me to make my own way." I smiled, remembering Patrick's fierce belief in self-reliance. He always said that earned success tastes sweeter than handed opportunity. He wanted you to know that feeling. He was right, William nodded. The satisfaction I got from my career achievements, knowing they came from my own efforts, that's something money can't buy, and it helped me recognize what truly matters. He turned to me with a warm smile. "I'm grateful, Mom, for the way you and Dad raised me, and for your wisdom in keeping the inheritance secret. It was a painful lesson, but an invaluable one." After the divorce was finalized, William and I had many long conversations about how to handle his substantial inheritance responsibly. He took time to educate himself about wealth management, philanthropy, and creating a meaningful legacy. Unlike Amanda, who had seen the money only as a means to status and luxury, William viewed it as a responsibility and an opportunity to make a positive difference. He continued working at his investment firm, finding purpose in his career, rather than abandoning it for a life of leisure. But he also established a foundation focused on financial literacy for young people, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. His own painful experience with Amanda had highlighted how crucial understanding money's true value really was. My own healing journey had been intertwined with supporting William through his pain. The maternal instinct to protect had never been stronger than when I watched him navigate the betrayal and public embarrassment of his failed marriage. But I had also found new purpose in helping guide him through the complexities of significant wealth, sharing the wisdom Patrick and I had developed over our years together. You know, William mused, in a strange way, I'm almost grateful for the experience with Amanda. Not for the hurt, but for what it taught me about myself and about the people who truly love me. He reached over to squeeze my hand, and for showing me that I can trust my own judgment again. I see things more clearly now. That clarity extended to his approach to dating again, though he was in no rush. When I do meet someone new, he told me, I'll know to look for the qualities that really matter. Kindness, integrity, genuine connection. And I think I'll know the difference between someone who wants me for who I am versus what I have. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the lawn, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here, the pain of losing Patrick, the discovery of unexpected wealth, the agonizing decision to keep it secret from William, the brief hope that Amanda might prove me wrong, and finally, the vindication that came at such a high emotional cost to my son. Money truly does reveal character, I thought. It had shown Amanda's greed and calculation. It had highlighted William's integrity and resilience. And it had given me the opportunity to protect my son one last time before he fully stepped into his inheritance, both the financial one from his father and the more valuable legacy of values we had tried to instill. Do you think there are people who can handle sudden wealth without it changing them? William asked, interrupting my thoughts. I think the people who handle wealth best are those who already know who they are and what really matters, I replied. People like you, William. He smiled, the peaceful expression on his face worth more than all the millions in our accounts combined. I had good teachers. As we sat there in comfortable silence, watching the first stars appear in the twilight sky, I felt profound gratitude. Despite the pain of the past year, we had emerged stronger and wiser. William had discovered his own resilience. I had found new purpose in guiding him through this transition. And together, we were honoring Patrick's legacy in the ways that truly mattered. Not through ostentatious displays of wealth, but through living according to the values he had cherished. True love, I reflected, isn't about what you can get from someone, but about who they help you become. Patrick had helped me become a woman of principle and quiet strength. I had tried to help William become a man of integrity and compassion. And now, tested by fire, he was emerging as someone who understood the true value of both money and love. That one is merely a tool, while the other is the very essence of a life well lived. What have you learned about family, money, and relationships? From my story, has there been a time when someone's true character was revealed to you in a surprising way? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe, and share it with someone who might need this reminder that our worth isn't determined by our wealth, but by our values and the love we share. Thank you for listening, and may you recognize the true treasures in your own life.